It did really change knowing those two books and your citation. When I looked at the book again, it did change the way I looked at it. You know,
Well,
abandoning it as a courtroom legal thriller, which is the sort of place
well,
you're
that's how they
normally
market me. I mean, you know,
yeah.
I mean, that's where they put me, and I'm not going to argue with them because they're being so successful. But this book really, you know, it's a little like, you know, my first novel in hardcover, Son of Holmes, you know, didn't have Holmes in it. My publisher named the book, and you know, and I felt like it was a bad idea because I knew it would make people mad if they're expecting a Holmes book and there's no Holmes. But I don't think this is going to make anybody mad because I think they're going to get Dismas and Abe and, you know, the guys.
Well, the books have gone through an evolution. As a matter of fact, there's a big difference from Dead Irish and The Big to 13th Juror, which was the one that I think really, you know, pumped up your career, so to speak.
Well, you know, you got to I try to keep these characters fresh for me too. And when I started Dead Irish, I had no idea I was going to be writing even two of them, much less 13 or 14.
But that was basically a private eye novel.
Yes.
I mean, you've got Dismas Hardy. Let's mention the name. Talk about interesting names today.
Okay.
Dismas is not your ordinary garden variety name
No.
here. He's the patron saint of thieves and murderers.
Yes, he was the good thief on Calvary.
On the cross.
On the cross, next to the right of Jesus.
To the right. Thank you. I didn't know which side he was
the
on.
other guy. Who was the other guy? Barabbas? No, Barabbas, the guy they let go. I don't know who the other one was.
I regret to tell you, I don't know either.
But Dismas is, you know, fabled in Catholic lore, and he was the first saint after Joseph, evidently.
So when you named your protagonist Dismas Hardy, you were
subconscious. It was all subconscious because Hardy, I know, came from the Hardy Boys. That only just came out in my, you know, I said in a little joke in the Mercy Rule, I said when Hardy's parents, Joe and Iola, died in a plane crash. So
amusing yourself, if nobody else,
just
right?
Totally amusing myself, because you know every time Joe and Frank Hardy got in a plane, it crashed. You know that. I mean, if you go back to the Hardy Boys, my son, when I used to read to him, you know, they'd end the chapter and it said, and they got into the twin-engine biplane, and Jack would go, don't read anymore, it's going to crash. And sure enough, it crashed every time, you know, and they lived. So.
Well, Dismas Hardy worked in a bar.
Yeah.
Real bar in San Francisco.
Right.
I'm trying to remember, did he himself have a drinking problem?
No, he was
he had some problem.
Whether he had a drinking problem, I think he really had just a loss of faith problem.
Okay.
He really was, you know, I refer to it in the books as kind of like being in a Guinness haze. I don't know if he had a drinking problem. He didn't get drunk. He didn't get drunk and fall down. He didn't, you know, drive drunk. He was, you know, he didn't go and commit crimes drunk, but he probably was drunk a lot. You know, whether or not he's got a problem with that, or
or maybe he just likes to drink.
Maybe he just liked to drink. He was really, he lost a son when he was, you know, in his first marriage, and that broke up his first marriage, just the pain of that. And he wasn't really good at facing those things too well anyway, and he just dropped out of life. So when we first meet him in the first book, he's a bartender at the Shamrock, and he's, you know, really kind of burned out.
And where's the Shamrock?
It's at 9th and Lincoln in San Francisco. I've worked there.
You have?
I was a bartender.
You mean it's an actual place?
Right, which you know, yes. It's been there since 1893.
As the Shamrock?
As the Shamrock.
I thought I knew San Francisco better than that.
No,
well, obviously I don't hang out.
I have a picture of it in my office. Just regular old, you know, come across the street with cars in front, click, there it is. But yeah, it's a real place, just as I describe it. 12-foot wide, you know, 22 feet in the back, crummy old jukebox, dartboard.
I love it.
It's cool.
Well, anyway, there's Dismas. So he does works this first case, Dead Irish, and then he comes back in the VIG, which stands for the Vigorish, which is what? Interest?
Interest on a loan shark loan. So if, you know, if you take out a loan, if you're foolish enough to take out a loan from a mafia type person or a loan shark, if you take out, say, a $5,000 loan, the VIG is 10% a week.
Right.
That's a hit. $500 a week, you know, just for, and that's not paying back the principal. And usually guys like that don't have it anyway because they're gambling it away. So they usually wind up dead or, you know, broken boned or turning to crime to pay back their loan.
I would assume that the loaner preferred them to turn to crime. I mean,
sure.
Dead, they don't get their money back, although I gather the deal is they can't afford to lose face, so it's one or the other. But anyway, and then by the time we get to the 13th juror, Hardy is changed.
Yeah, the big change really came with, actually the book before that, which is Hard Evidence.
Right.
Because suddenly, you know, there was a little period of time in between the writing of the VIG and hard evidence because I got sick. I had that spinal meningitis in
Is
LA.
that why I noticed that there was a couple-year gap?
Yeah, I was, number one, the books weren't successful. Dead Irish and the VIG were just complete, I mean, they might have been artistically nice, but they were just bombs. So I didn't even know if I was going to write any more novels. I was living down in LA, and I said, you know, maybe I'll try some screenplays. I wrote a couple of screenplays. I wrote a couple of treatments, you know, actually got paid for a couple of things and said, well, this might be something. But I just, my heart's not in it. I mean, I really am a novelist. That's what I like to do. But I just didn't know how to make a living at it. So then I got sick and I almost died, and I, you know, spent a year trying to just survive my job because I knew we were going to move up to Northern California out of LA. And when I moved up, I said, okay, I know I'd had a lot of time to think about it. I know I'm going to write another Hardy book, and he's going to be a different person.
So you sent him to law school?
No, he'd already been.
Oh, he'd already been?
Luckily, I'd made him an ex-lawyer. I mean, you know, I covered all those bases.
I forgot he was an ex-lawyer. I
Yeah.
thought he was an ex-this and that.
No, he was an ex-lawyer, an ex-cop, an ex-Marine.
Yeah, I remember the cop.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. But he had actually been a lawyer. He was a prosecutor. And he got hired back as a prosecutor.
Amazing. Now, that's what I thought he was doing in that gap. While you
No.
you did something like what? You innocently went swimming off Seal Beach, and
Yeah.
the next thing you know,
Yeah.
what was it? Bad water?
I think so. It had rained. You know, it doesn't rain often in the summer in Southern California, and it rained the day before, big rain, and a lot of, you know, junk washed into the water. And I was body surfing, and the next day I woke up with an earache, and that night I was delirious and crazy. And, you know, Lisa took me to the hospital at 3 in the morning and said to the doctor, what should she do? And the doctor said, well, you should find a good funeral home. Is that what you're looking for? Because he's dead. You know, he's not going to make it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what do you attribute your rally?
Well, two things. My good friend Chris Landon is a guy who lives in Ojai. He's a doctor, and he was my roommate for a long time before I was married. And Lisa called him, and he diagnosed over the phone what he thought it must be. The doctor there, we had an intern there at this night, you know, emergency place, and he had never seen spinal meningitis. And he just knew I had trouble with eye dilation and that I was completely delirious, and, you know, something was wrong with my brain, he knew. And Chris said, well, of course, it's John, something's wrong with his brain, you know. But he diagnosed it over the phone. And he said, what you want to do right now, before you even know what it is, give him 90 million units of penicillin, get him on a drip right this minute. And that's pretty much, I think, what saved my life. But I was in a coma for 11 days.
Wow.
So I woke up and went, hi, everybody. What's been going on?
That's a profound experience.
It was, and it changed my whole, I mean, it really, if you want to talk about worldview changing, it changed it all. Because I had been working tremendous amounts of hours just to pay the bills and to work my day job and my night job and my writing job in the morning. I was writing in the mornings. And I was probably working 18, 20 hours a day. And I've been doing that for 6 years. And still just writing, you know, you know, I was writing derivative books, I thought. And I said, well, I'm going to write a real book now. And I figured I was old enough, and I changed Hardy and made him the kind of guy that he is now, and Abe the kind of guy he is. And just took more chances and wrote bigger books.
How did you finance that?
I didn't really. For the first year, I didn't get paid. I handed in hard evidence, and my publisher at the time did not even pay me for it. So it was very tough, and we lived up in Davis. My wife is an architect. She went to work drafting for $10 an hour. And in 1994, anybody listening out there wants to know how recent all this is. In 1994, our family of 4 living in Davis made $22,000, which
Tough
is
haul.
poverty level.
In California especially.
Yeah, it's poverty. So it was very tough. I mean, you know, we borrowed money from our in-laws, borrowed money from everybody I could think of. My brother finally came through, and when I really hit bottom, I just said, look, I can't just go month to month, week to week. We can't make it. So I went to my younger brother, who was, you know, a very successful businessman, and I said, Emmett, why don't you lend me $100,000? And I will pay you back at 20% interest. Because I was writing 13th Juror, and I knew it was going to be a good book, and I knew that hard evidence had been picked up in Germany and Japan for 6-figure amounts. So I knew I had money coming in.
Right.
But with my publisher being the guy he was, there wasn't any sign of it on the horizon. It was
Is that when you were at Donald Fine?
Donald Fine.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to be at least a year, maybe a year and a half, if I ever saw it. If I ever saw it. But at least I could, you know, use that leverage to get a loan from my brother, and you know, try to also bring some leverage to bear on Don Fine, because finally I might be worth something.